Let's take a look at the reasons why you do what you do. You can do things out of two primary motivations. For example, one is inspiration and one is obligation. It's easy to get them mixed up, especially if you've been in a pattern of behavior for quite some time. Inspiration is when you do something authentically from the bottom of your heart because you genuinely want to do it. In the context of a relationship, let's say you make your partner coffee every morning, and originally you may have started doing this out of inspiration. It's something you wanted to do. You were just happy to give out of joy, and it gave you joyful feelings. It made you feel connected with your partner. There was a reciprocity elsewhere in your relationship, and you just felt good about what you were doing for them. Now, over time, if the reasons you've been doing that, making the coffee for your partner, begin to change, if the circumstances around it change, let's say you get a different job and it's no longer convenient or easy for you in the morning, or maybe you've just lost touch with that feeling of giving and joy and connection that came with it originally, you may start to feel like that activity is being done out of obligation or because you have to, not because you want to. There's an expectation that may have built up over time, implicitly or explicitly. And the feelings that come up around doing something out of obligation are very different than those that come up out of doing something out of inspiration. For example, maybe some resentment in extreme cases, or feeling like it's a chore, or not feeling really connected with your internal motivations. So if things change and you're doing something out of obligation instead of inspiration, this is a really good indication that you could do some self-evaluation to understand your motivations, the conditions, the pros and cons of doing particular activities, and whether or not it authentically suits you to continue to do them. It is also a really good indicator to talk to your partner, saying, for example, hey, I know I've been bringing you coffee every morning, and I know you kind of expect that of me, and I know you really benefit from getting it, but it no longer works for me because of the following reasons, and I'm not connected to this activity, and I don't feel connected to you through this activity either. It's not coming from an authentic place. And as your partner, I want to do things for you that come from an authentic place, out of inspiration. And your partner probably doesn't want you to do things out of obligation either, because that's kind of yucky. People can usually feel when that's happening. There's a little bit of resentment, not a lot of joy. You can tell you're maybe inconveniencing the other person, something like that. So if your partner comes to you and says, hey, I've been doing this thing, or I want to do this thing, but I feel obligated, how can we change the circumstances? How can we do things out of joy, authenticity, genuine desire to give to one another, rather than the circumstances that have led to a sense of obligation or that they have to do something? Technically, you don't have to do anything. A lot of people think that you do. For example, you don't have to go to work, ever. But there are consequences if you choose not to go to work. You will not have the income you may have wanted. Your life experiences may be limited. There's a whole cascade of things that could happen. Or you don't have to keep your agreement to be monogamous with your partner if that is your agreement. But there are consequences of not doing that, right? If you choose to break up or cheat on your partner or any of these things that may feel more authentic, gets a little dicey there. But basically, yeah, you don't have to stay in a relationship. You don't have to be monogamous, but there are consequences if you choose not to be, right? If you say, I refuse to be monogamous, I don't want to be in an exclusive relationship, you are speaking authentically from what your genuine needs and desires are, but the consequences there are you may not have that particular partner you really loved because they don't want to join you on that journey. And that's okay, but isn't it better to be honest than to do something out of obligation that is begrudging and may make you feel stuck and you're doing something inauthentically? Not because you're inspired, because you're like, all right, this is a price I'm willing to pay to be with this person that I really love. You're like, I'm stuck, I'm obligated, I have to do this thing. So watch your language around the way you talk about the things that you do in your life. So if you're saying, I have to go do this thing for my partner, you're kind of casting a spell on yourself because words have impact. So when you speak about your actions in a place of obligation and have to, then you're not connected anymore to the motivations, the reason that you've been doing them in the first place, the pros and cons, whatever the cost benefit analysis is that you've done, and you've disempowered yourself. And in fact, if you continue to do things out of a sense of have to or obligation, you betray yourself. And so it's a really good idea to practice self-awareness, self-analysis, and understand why you do what you do, where it's coming from, find the places in your life where you're doing something out of obligation, and see if you can reimagine it. See if you can reframe and understand that, oh, I'm doing this thing because I care that my partner is comfortable, or I prefer the outcome better if I do this thing. You know, it's better to be honest with yourself and honest with your partner and talk about why you're doing what you're doing. And you can use this lens for just about anything that you do in your life. If you think that you feel stuck doing something, it's like, let me take a look and put that through the lens or through the filter of inspiration versus obligation and see if I can change the way I think about it. It might just be a matter of shifting your attitude. I'm not saying you should gaslight yourself, like trick yourself into thinking that you want to do something that you actually don't want to do. So that's not the case. I'm just saying, if you get in touch with your deeper motivations, you can empower yourself to feel feelings you'd prefer to feel about the things that you do in your life. Much credit goes to Marshall Rosenberg for this framing in Nonviolent Communication. Have to versus want to. Watch the way that you talk about things. And is it a signal for you to change your attitude and better understand your motivations for doing something? This is very powerful within a context of relationship. So have that conversation with yourself and with your partner, and try to, in my opinion, do things more out of inspiration than obligation, because I believe you will have a much happier life and much more relationship satisfaction.